What's up? My name is Mr. Honish and welcome to my flipped classroom. Now, before we start today, I have a very serious question for all of you. When you study a certain country, what are the most important things that you should look at? It's a question that you'll have to ask yourself a bunch of times this year as you look at various countries, but the answer is there really is no simple answer to that question. I can't tell you what's more important to look at for any given country. All I can really do is just throw a bunch of stuff at you, all kinds of facts, all kinds of statistics to look at. You're going to have to figure out how to use those to analyze the country and put the puzzle pieces together yourself. So, since we have so much to talk about, I'm not going to make like a 48-minute video going over all of it. I've broken it down into subcategories. Here's a quick preview of the items that we'll talk about. All of them are going to tell you something important about a country, but we are going to break it up into multiple videos. Overall, the series will cover population, culture, government, economy, and something we call standard of living. So, I think to start with, the remainder of this video, we'll talk about population. It makes sense to start with the people of the country first. So let's talk about it. Now, population is probably a word that you've heard many times before, especially if you pay attention to road signs as you drive in and out of various cities. All population is the total number of people, and it can be calculated by city, state, country, the whole world, my basement, school, whatever. It's just the total number of people for that given area. But looking at just the population doesn't actually tell us the whole story. Population density is the measure of a number of people living in a certain area. It sounds a lot like the definition for population, but population density is usually given in how many people are per square mile or per square kilometer. So it's the area. Population and population density can definitely change over time, so we need to look at a couple other things to help us keep track of that. Two tools that we can use are total fertility rate, or TFR, and life expectancy, or LE. Now, life expectancy is the average number of years a person can expect to live in a given area. So in the United States, for instance, if our life expectancy is 78, we can expect that the average American would live to be about 78 years old. Some countries have very high life expectancies, which you would think means that more people stick around longer for the overall population. Some countries have a lot lower life expectancy, which means that they die off quicker. On the flip side, total fertility rate, or TFR, is the average number of children a woman can expect to have over her lifetime in a given area. Again, a high total fertility rate is very different than a low total fertility rate. High total fertility rate means lots of children on average, tons of new babies. So you would think that would mean the population would increase. Really low total fertility rates mean very, very few children. If your total fertility rate is too low, your population overall might be at risk of decreasing. If a population were to stay steady, most geographers agree that your total fertility rate would have to be about 2.1. So that means 2.1 children on average per woman over her lifetime. This is the sad part. Not every child that is born will survive to live a normal, healthy life. In fact, many children die within the first year of being born. We have another separate statistic that looks at this called infant mortality rate, and it takes a look at the number of children that will statistically die before their first birthday. We calculate it out of every 1,000 births, and in the United States, if we have about an infant mortality rate of 5, that means that only 5 children out of every 1,000 that are born will die before their first birthday. Again, this is not the case in every country. If your country has an infant mortality rate of 100, that means that 100 of every 1,000 children will die before their first birthday. To get an even clearer picture on the overall population, we can take total fertility rate life expectancy, infant mortality rate, and mix them with migration patterns. We are still talking about humans and not Canadian geese, but the principle of migration is still the same. Migration just means the process of moving from one place to live in another. We can divide migration into two categories: immigration and emigration. Immigration means coming into a new area, and emigration means leaving your old area. I'm going to answer your question before you even ask it. Yes. If you are an immigrant, you are also an emigrant. If you are an emigrant, you are also an immigrant. You can't just float around in some kind of other dimension between countries. So yes, immigrants are emigrants, emigrants are immigrants. Let's move on. Long story short, if we look at how many emigrants versus immigrants there are in a certain area, we can find its net migration rate, which is basically a simple math term that is a number close to zero. If that number is positive, that means that more immigrants are there than emigrants, more people coming in than leaving. If the net migration rate happens to be negative, it means there are more immigrants, more people leaving than coming in. There is one final way that we can break down an area's population to give us a more complete picture. We can use a tool called a population pyramid. Believe it or not, you can find a population pyramid for just about any country on Earth, not just Egypt. Pyramid, Egypt, get it?
Mr. Honish's cheesy jokes. Mr. Honish's cheesy jokes.
Cheesy jokes. Essentially what a population pyramid does is break down the numbers by age and gender. And at first glance of a population pyramid, you can easily tell whether the population of that area seems to be growing, staying steady, or decreasing. A pyramid that is wide at the bottom, where the younger ages are, and narrow at the top, where older ages are, would show us a population that is growing over time. A population pyramid that is flat on the sides, that's pretty much the same at the younger ages as it is in the older ages, would show us a population that's staying steady. A population that has sides that narrow towards the bottom, wider at the top, that would mean there are more old people than young people. That population is probably declining. The main thing you have to be careful with when you analyze a population pyramid is when you look at the very top. Many times it looks like population must be growing because the top is the narrowest part. I am now going to give you a concrete, conclusive, universal truth that will explain why the top of the population pyramid is almost always the narrowest. Are you ready? Listen carefully. Old people die. It's what they do. I'm sorry if that sounds cruel, but old people die more than young people do. It happens. Nobody lives forever, so the pyramid is bound to get narrower the higher it goes. There isn't a country on the planet with a really high population of 110-year-olds. It just doesn't happen. So keep that in mind when you look at the top of the pyramid. As I leave you, let that be a lesson as you look at populations. There are definitely trends and patterns that hide in the numbers and statistics. But when we combine it all together, when you put all those puzzle pieces together, that's when you are well on your way to analyzing a population successfully. With that, go study, and until next time, bye-bye.